So, Terry, would you like to introduce our guest today?
I would be happy to. Welcome, everybody. I'm Terry Morrison, and I'm so happy to have our wonderful guest speaker with us today, Jan McDaniel. Jan is a retiree after 36 years of running international marketing organizations for Hewlett Packard and Intel. And most recently, she was the chief marketing officer for Bright Talk.
Yeah, and
Jan,
from the property, you can see the mountains of Yosemite.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a great view.
And Jan has been an active member of LAUMC for over 30 years, and we are so blessed to have her. Jan has been involved in Bible study, all kinds of leadership roles in our church, the Just Faith leader. She is the head of Bold Service and Social Justice Committee, and she's the co-founder and chairperson of Compassion Week, and so much more.
Okay.
Could everybody mute themselves, please?
Can the guy that's installing it take it?
Could somebody, everybody mute themselves. Thank you. Okay, and sorry, Jan. So she is just a wonderful asset to our church, as you all know. Jan is married to Bob Visa, and they have 2 daughters and 3 grandchildren. And Jan is just returning from London, where her 3rd grandchild was born 1 month ago, and is an adorable little girl. And so we welcome you, Grandma Jan. Yay! Thank you for your time.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'm off mute, so I just want to make sure everybody can hear me, okay? Yeah? Nice.
Yes.
Can I just say that I want to say a few things. So first of all, so wonderful to see so many familiar faces on this meeting. Some people I have so appreciated working side by side with over the years. So many people I admire for their commitment to LAUMC. And it just always feels so happy to be able to have an opportunity to get to know all of you and your stories, as well as you're going to hear a little bit about mine. So that's number 1. Number 2, our church is so blessed to have Kyle and his the work that he does to keep our church going. I don't have as many opportunities to give him high fives in big groups. Every time I see him, he knows I usually give him a hug or a little kiss on his cheek, but that's always private between the 2 of us. So right now, I just want to do a shout out to Kyle for all that he does to make our church work. And lastly,
You're welcome.
Lastly, before I get started, I'm really busy right now. As Terry said, I just got back from London as chairperson of Compassion Week. That's a huge project. And my joy in life is to try to figure out how to make Compassion Week work while my life still works. So I don't ever step back from commitments that I make because of Compassion Week. Terry came to me a while ago and said, Jan, can you come and talk about the work that you do in the jails? But I know it's during Compassion Week or right before Compassion Week, so you're probably going to be too swamped. I said, Terry, absolutely love to come in and make the time. Part of the reason is because of Terry. A lot of times we forget that there are people who are just full of so much joy, who do so much. And when someone like Terry asks me to do something, it is with great joy that I say yes, and because I think she's so committed and to the church, so committed to building a stronger and more compassionate community. And so, Leslie Carmichael's like that. Leslie can just ask me to drop anything and do anything, and I will do it in a New York minute. Because when people are as committed as somebody like a Leslie Carmichael or a Terry, you just say yes. So thank you for the opportunity, and Terry, thank you for what you do. Now, I have been asked to talk about the work that I'm doing specifically as a chaplain, and how I got to this point, a chaplain in the Santa Clara County jails, and how I got to that point, and what that experience is like for me. I'm assuming that that's what you want to hear. And before I get started, is there anything specific that you all want to make sure that I mention or speak to specifically? I'm not seeing any hands raised or anybody putting anything in the chat. So what I'll do then is talk for a little while. I'll pause for questions. I'll talk a little bit more, and make sure that we have an opportunity to turn this into slightly interactive, if that's a format that people would be comfortable with. Because as some of you know, once I get started, it's really hard for me. I get so enthusiastic about what I'm talking about or what I'm doing. So I want to just ensure that there's space to make sure that we get your questions answered. So on that note, let me ask if you can just raise your hands on your screens. Do you know why that there are chaplains in the jails and in the prison system? Do you know why that's the case? Does anybody know? I'm not seeing any hands. I see some questioning looks. It is because Gina, put yourself off mute, Gina, and let me see what you know.
Thanks. I was going to take a wild guess and just say that people tend to be very receptive when they're hit with the consequences of their actions, and they're in a better place to make a change and to have some support in making it, because I'm guessing the other inmates don't really support each other very much in the wild in there without some guidance and direction and love and prayers and a few things like that added to the mix. But that's my guess.
I wish that was the case. I love that guess. I wish it was, right? Because, but it's required by the Constitution. Yeah. So there are two, and that is true. That's the truth. There are two institutions that require free exercise of religious expression. All right. And that is prisons and jails. Does anybody know what the second one would be?
Churches?
No. The second one is the military. Anybody watch MASH in the old days? Show MASH. Yeah, and so the military and prisons and jails. Constitutionally, people have a right in the military and in jails to have access to a chaplain. And the reason for that is, I want to read the ruling, the constitutional ruling. I actually looked it up this morning because I was fascinated by it. Since the government has deprived such persons of the opportunity to practice their faith at places of their choice, government may, in order to avoid infringing the free exercise guarantees of the Constitution, provide substitutes where it requires such persons to be. And the two places that are required to be by the government are the military, right? Because when you join the military, you don't get to choose, and prisons and jails. So that's the two exceptions. the Supreme Court has gone so far as to say prisoners must only be provided a reasonable opportunity to exercise their religious freedom. Okay, so it doesn't mean that you have access to any, say you're Episcopalian, you don't get access to an Episcopalian rector legally. You just have to have the opportunity to a reasonable opportunity to exercise your religious freedom. This is really important. This is back to what I think many of us believe that, and I believe this very firmly, there would be no, for most people who are incarcerated, there would be no access to any religious or spiritual opportunities unless it was mandated by the Constitution. Because what we need to know is that life behind bars is horrible. It is limited. There is no desire. There's minimal desire to treat people who are incarcerated with any ounce of humanity. And so even as Gina had mentioned, well, maybe people are more willing to have to connect spiritually or have a stronger desire to because of circumstances. Just because they're willing doesn't mean they would ever have the opportunity had it not been required. So here's an example. Okay, there are many, many people who are incarcerated who have addiction issues. They don't have access to Alcoholics Anonymous or programs that help them understand how to overcome their addiction. Some do, some don't. There's no consistency there. If you're in the unit where I volunteer, which is the mental health unit, they don't have access to any of that programming. So, but the one thing they have access to is access to an opportunity to request and require either a one-on-one chaplain visit or in some cases, opportunities for group spiritual formation. So that's the background. So before I move into my story of how I got involved, any questions or any specifics?
Unmute.
Either.
Yeah. How did you get started in this and how long have you been doing it?
Yes. So now I'm going to start my story now. So I started and I want to say that I started my journey about 13 years ago. I had taken Disciple Bible Study for 4 years. I went through the entire program, and it encouraged me to think more broadly about walking my faith. And I then followed up Disciple with the Just Faith curriculum. And during Just Faith, and I know, Judith, you've taken Just Faith. During Just Faith introduces you to a number of different issues and the potential Christian response to those issues. And one of the things that struck me, and this was 13 years ago, one of the things that struck me was this need and this command to visit the prisoner. You know, there's not a lot of commands in the New Testament. Clothing your neighbor is one of them, right? Loving your neighbor like you love yourself. But there is the ask to visit the prisoner. I thought long and hard about what that would look like, and is that a calling for me? Because I believe in that. I believe in really praying and thinking deeply about something. And at the time, I was really involved with Compassion Week. And just, do any of you know Kathy Lampman? Wonderful Kathy Lampman, very involved in UMW and just been a long member of our church for many, many years. And Kathy was part of the Compassion Week team and had mentioned that there were opportunities at Elmwood that we should consider adding to our Compassion Week list of activities. Elmwood, for those of you who maybe know or don't know, Elmwood is the largest jail in Santa Clara County. So the Santa Clara County has county jail, the youth facility, and then Elmwood, which is Milpitas. Elmwood was designed for 2,000 people and is currently holding 5,000. Okay, just to give you a feel. So one of those opportunities was to participate in a Sunday worship service. And I thought, that'd be interesting. I'm going to sign up for that. So as a Compassion Week project. So I signed up for it, filled out all the forms, got the clearance, blah, 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 went. And it was minimum security. And minimum security at Elmwood at the time on the women's side, the women wore the black and white striped uniforms. I could call them uniforms. And when the women walked into that room where we were hosting this session in their black and white striped uniforms, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so real. This, like, it was this, I don't know, I didn't even know where I was, and I was so out of my comfort zone. But I recognized a woman there. And she was a woman that I had gotten to know a little bit in some of the volunteer work I had done with Hope's Corner. And I sat next to her and we were chit-chatting a little bit, and I lamented that I was sorry to see her here, but that it was lovely to be with her. And I walked away from that service thinking, ooh, I think maybe there's a reason that I went to this. And but I was scared to like really commit. And even I was scared to take the next step. But I did. And I took the next step about 4 months later. And the next step was to contact CIC, which is the chaplaincy, and the only organization at Elmwood that is allowed to have volunteers. So say you wanted to go and teach an origami class, you could not do that at Elmwood. You would have to go through the chaplaincy office, right? If you wanted to do yoga, you couldn't do that unless you did. So there's no way that you could go into the jails and volunteer to do anything unless you do it through CIC, because they don't want volunteers. They don't want our neighbors that are incarcerated to have access to anything. And so the way that it happens is through the chaplaincy, because they're the only ones constitutionally that are required to allow people to go inside. So continuing on my journey, I contacted CIC and I was interviewed by them. And they were very interested at the time to understand what was my motivation. Why would I want to go in there? And the reason that they were interested is because they were trying very, very hard to weed out people who were going in volunteering, whose sole objective was, and they call it this, scalps on belts. Right? Yeah, it's kind of tricky. There's a whole evangelical movement that all they want to do is go inside these jails and have these people commit excuse me, commit to turning their life over to Christ. They call that a scalp. And they leave, and then they all get together and say, oh, well, this month we converted 12 people. So we have 12 scalps on our belt. So they've been really trying to weed people out because A, it's completely unhealthy. And B, it isn't the type of support that people need inside. But anyway, so I did my interview. Then I had to do some training, very, very simple training. And then I had to get several letters of recommendation. So I did that. And that took me about 6 months, but I still didn't commit. So 7 months later, on New Year's Eve, I was sitting with a really good friend of mine. I don't know if you know Susie Buchholz, but Susie and Bill Buchholz and Bob and I always get together on New Year's Eve. And we were reflecting on the year. And Susie looked at me and said, what is the one thing, Jan, you really want to do? And I said, you know, I really want to go inside. I really, really want to do that. But I know that if I do that, it has to be a strong commitment. I have to be willing to do it every week. I have to show up at the same time because these people, their lives, no one has shown up for them. And that if I just like say, oh, I'll fill in or I'll be available as needed, or I only want to do once a month, that I wouldn't really have the impact that I felt needed to happen. And I was scared. I was scared to go inside. I was scared to make that commitment. To be honest, I was hesitant to even talk to Bob at any great length about it because I thought that he would have some objections to it. So I put a lot of impediments in front of this commitment, but I worked through them all. You know, I talked to Bob about it. Bob was like, I don't think it's safe. And I said, you know, my experience going inside, and I had done some shadowing, so I knew it. My experience is you're safer inside than you are any other place. Any other place. You are so much safer there than at Hope's Corner or at We Hope or at, you know, the parking lot of CSA or even in your grocery store, because there is so much protection there. There's guards. For me to get into my unit, I counted on Wednesday, I was there. Wednesdays is my day. You go through 8 locked doors. You get buzzed into 8 different, it takes about 30 minutes to go through the, all the steps you have to do to get into your unit. And once you're in your unit, there's always 2 guards. And at this point, those women would sacrifice their lives for me. They love me that much. They are I feel so safe and so welcomed. And I have never not felt safe there. And I've been inside when there's been lockdowns. I've been inside where there's been fires and violence and, things where I've been asked to like what they call lockdown, or you have to leave immediately. And I've never not felt safe, ever. So to answer Judith's question, it took me about 2 years to go from, I went to that one service, I did some shadowing, I filled out the forms, I took the thing to actually making the commitment, because I knew that once I made the commitment, it needed to be a commitment. So that's how I got started. And I'd love to tell you what I do there and what my experience is like. But before I do that, are there any other questions about my process and kind of getting started? Yeah, Judith. You're on mute.
Were there others who were in this process too, or was it just you?
Well, they are always looking for volunteers. And so in the training, I am required every year to and not required by the government or by the jails, but by CIC, the chaplaincy, to take a training, and also, and so there were hundreds of people in the training, hundreds. So, and I don't know how many of you, we don't know how many of them are brand new, or how many are just chaplains that are just renewing their training. And then there's another training that is required. There are several trainings that are required. The other one is trauma training. So very interesting fact that 98% of all people that are incarcerated have experienced trauma, including the men, by the way. The men have a very high trauma rate. You think it's just women, but it's very high. The women is 100% and the men is like 96%. And the trauma can be anything from sexual, verbal, physical abuse to mental abuse, through even just going through the process of incarceration, right? So dealing with people who have experienced extreme trauma, we've had training on that. The other thing is, anybody who has, particularly women, who have had to sleep one night, just one night out on the streets, experiences trauma, because they are afraid of their safety, it's just a host of things. So the population that is incarcerated are traumatized neighbors. The other thing I want to mention is, of the 5,000 people that are sitting there in Elmwood, it's less than 10% of people who've been convicted of anything. All right. Those people inside don't look like you and me. Okay. They're not Caucasian. They do not represent the population of Santa Clara County as far as demographics. 1. 2, most of them are inside because they have no bail money, no access to bail, or they are awaiting their trial. I have a woman who has been in for 4 years now. I don't know why she's in, but she wears red. So there's a color-coded system. If you wear red, that's a felony. If you wear green, it's a misdemeanor. So if you wear orange, you're pregnant. So, there's a color-coded system, and black and white is minimum security, but I don't work in minimum security. I'm not involved in minimum. So, so I have a woman in there. She's a lovely, lovely woman. If you would love to pray for her, her name is Cheryl, and she's been in for 4 years waiting for her trial. Now it's a felony. So and I never ask why anyone is there. I never ask that question because I don't care. I absolutely do not care. The biggest thing for me is to let people know that there is nothing that I can do to help their legal situation. And I do not want to know why they are there. Because I am there because they are my neighbor. And I have been called to love my neighbor like I love myself. And I often tell my women, I love me so much I take such good care of me. I go on nice vacations. I get my hair done. I eat really good food. I drink nice wine. I love myself. I love my neighbor as much as I love me. The world would be a different place. So, but anyway, yeah, so these are not people who are inside because they're horrific, horrible people. They're inside because at this point, because they don't have bail money, they don't have they haven't had their trial yet. Our courts are so overcrowded, or they have been convicted and they're but they have been offered a program, which happens a lot. So I have a woman who stole a hot dog. This is not a joke. One hot dog. Okay. Now, 3 strikes and you're out. So this was her 3rd offense of taking something. She never took more than 1 item to eat in her life. She was hungry. She had no family. She had no, I mean, she might have had other options, but she would steal a hot dog from 7-Eleven. She was in jail for 15 months for stealing a hot dog. And the reason she was in jail for 15 months was because she was offered a program, meaning she was offered the opportunity to get off the streets into a bed in a program that had wraparound services to help her get back on her feet. The problem is there's no space in any of these programs. So people languish in jail, and jail is not a healthy place, for months, sometimes years before there's a seat in a program. Different story. So back on my story. So when I decided I'm ready to do it, I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna show up every week. When I was ready to do it, they were so excited to have me, and they said, "Where do you want to go?" And I said, "Well, I think there's a huge need in the men's side because there's 4 times as many men as women. But I said, I think I'd be most comfortable working with women. And that's where I would like to go." And I said, and they said, "Well, do you have a preference?" And I said, no, I didn't know the units. The units are different. Some of them are dorms, some of them are lockdown units. You know, I didn't really know. And I said, "Well, where's the biggest need? I'm available." And they said, "We have no one who's willing to go into the mental health unit." And I was like, naive me went, "Okay, great. That's where I'll go." And that's where I've been for the last 10 years. Every Wednesday that I happen to be in town, is I'm in the mental health unit, women's unit W4A. And that's where I hold what I call a spiritual formation group. And I don't call it a Bible study because lots of times we don't do a Bible study. Lots of times we do poetry, or we do singing, or and we welcome anyone to the group. Now, that being said, it's very dependent on who the guards will let out. This is a lockdown unit. The women are only required to have 2 hours a day outside of their cell unit, which isn't very much time. But so it's very dependent on who the guards are that day, and how they're feeling about the women. I always provide them a list of the women I'd like to come out, along with their numbers and the unit, the doors that, you know, the cells that they're in. But it really is very dependent on who the guards are that day. And some guards are wonderful and the unit was designed for 40 people, and there's 86 women living in the unit right now. So very, very, very crowded. There's absolutely zero privacy. The unit has a bunk bed, and it has an open toilet that sits right at the front of the unit. So anybody walking by will see a person using the toilet. And there are men guards there. This is a full women's unit. There are men, there's a social worker who makes visits who happens to be a male. So there's absolutely zero privacy for these women. And so the unit basically has one sink, a metal toilet, no lid, no toilet seat, and bunk beds. That's it. It's cement floor. The unit I have, which each one does have a window. It's not a functioning window, but it has a window. So every week I go in, I bring a program in. I shared this with Susie Buckholtz. So Susie and I rotate, who's going to lead the study. Right now, I'm doing, started a 3-part series that we create the materials ourselves on prayer, which has been really fun. And we're talking a lot about prayer but we talk about fear, we talk about isolation. We're very careful and cautious about the words we use. We don't refer to God as Father, because many of these women have really have been abused by their fathers, have no father figure in their life. The word father is not a positive connotation. And so, we're careful about the language we use. The word love is very tricky. It's hard for women inside to understand the concept of God's love and what that looks like. We did this long, conversation about the different types of love that's mentioned in the Bible, and the differences of the different types of love, and how. So we have these conversations, and we are working with people who suffer from mental health issues. I'd say maybe 80% of them are related to drug and alcohol abuse. And that's because of the trauma that they've experienced. High percentage of them have been, are from parents who were incarcerated, who are from, families, lots of abuse, have lived on the streets for, way too long. I mean, I could tell you some stories that are just hysterical. I'll tell you this one story. So we have, and we see these women cycle in a lot. There's one woman, I'll tell you her first name. I don't know her last name. Her name is Marciella, but I call her Trouble. She calls me Red. I call her Trouble. And I hadn't seen her in a couple of years. And she was back in. And I walked into the unit, and the unit that I work in is, it's separate jail. It's separate cells, locked in cells. So there's 20 on the bottom and 20 on the top. And you walk into this big open space past the guards things. I walked in and I heard this little red yelled from the top upstairs. And I'm like, holy crap, excuse my language. Marciella's back. We hadn't seen her in 2 years. I've been praying for her that she stays out, and she's back in. So I asked the guard, can I go upstairs? Because you have to ask permission. Can I walk up the stairs and see Marciella? And they said yes. I walk up there and I go, Marcella, why are you here? And she said, well, Jan, I set my boyfriend on fire. It's a true story. I said, what? She said, well, she's at the, we were, what is that? Vasona. There's a big homeless population by Lake Vasona, and that's in Los Gatos, I think. And so she said, yeah, we were in our tent, and I went out to get some food, and I came back, and he was in bed with someone. He was in bed with someone. And I was so mad. I just lit his sleeping bag on fire. And I looked at her and I said, do you think it was a good idea? And she said, it was a terrible idea, but man, did that feel good. this is the kind of stuff that I hear during, in my visits from people sometimes. But, so typically what I do is, we go in, we get an hour. So our hour is from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock. And so we show up around 12:30 because it takes about a half hour to get your clearance and to sign in. And, they have to check you in the system, and then you have to go through a metal detectors. You cannot bring your phones in. You can't, so you have to be, you have to get everything cleared. And every week I bring 8 paperback books because that's the magic number. I could bring books, but I can only bring 8. And we bring color sheets and, so we have bags of goodies. And I collect the comics from a newspaper every day and bring that in. We go in and we have our program, and, the guards let so many people out. We sit around a round table and we do our program. And, when our hour's up, we leave, basically. We try to allow time for some one-on-ones, meaning that there are times when women would like special, have prayer requests. And, so sometimes we'll try to end 5 minutes early if we can, just to have some just one-on-one time. And there are many times when like this past week, they for some reason, it's very frustrating, they wouldn't let us in because the guards, there always has to be 2 guards, and lunches ran late. And so we didn't get in until 1:40, which doesn't really allow us time to do our program. So we just did what we call door-to-doors, where we just go to as many units as we can and just knock on the glass and do a check-in and ask if someone wants a prayer. And we'll hold our hand. I held my hand up to the glass and ask the woman on the other side to put her hand up, and then we pray together. So that's very brief, and I know I've talked too long, but one of the things that you need to understand is the severe isolation of people inside. They don't have, if someone took your cell phone away from you, would you know how to contact anyone? There's probably very few phone numbers and addresses you have memorized at this point in your life. Maybe you're better than me. Their phones are taken away from them immediately. Okay, if they have them, all right? The only way they can make calls is if they have money on a commissary. Okay, so they are completely isolated from their family and friends if they don't have money on a commissary. And the way you get money on a commissary is someone outside putting money on it for you. So if you don't have a family member putting money on a commissary, then you also don't have opportunities to connect with people. And the commissary is used as sort of a monetary system within the jails. So for instance, if you have money on a commissary and you could get Doritos, and someone 4 doors down loves Doritos, you might trade their breakfast for a thing of Doritos. So that happens a lot, right? Or, you want to shake, I don't know. So it's interesting. So no phones, no commissary equals no connection. That's why we do things like do a card drive at our church, where people donate their cards that they have, because these women love to have cards that they can then write letters to their kids. Most of these women are moms, which breaks my heart. But so we give them every week, we bring blank cards in, they can write the cards. The cards then have to be read by the officers that are there. But if the officers, look at them and think they're fine, then the chaplains will then pay for the stamps and mail through the chaplaincy office, mail the cards. So it's a way of making connections. So there's lots of ways that you can support this effort without going inside yourself, right? Because it's not for everyone, and I know it's not for everyone. But you know, things like, you know, donating cards. We actually have a card sorting event on October 6th because the cards can't have any embellishment on them. They can't have anything that pops up. They can't have, they're so restrictive on what can be on the card. Can't have glitter. You know, I mean, it's horrible, you know, so we have to kind of sort through. But you know, there's ways of supporting the work that's done without actually going inside too. But I'm going to stop because I've spent a lot of time talking, because I warned you once I get started, because I'd love to have people ask me questions or just hear what your thoughts are.
Jan, you do amazing work. It's just so interesting to hear what you're doing and the impact. Oh my gosh. What do you call the inmates? Are they called guests, or is there a name that they are?
Well, you know what? We would never call them guests. And it's tricky because I just want to give you an example. For Compassion Week this year, one of our Compassion Week projects is these kits that we're putting together for the youth that are being or that are going through the system. And in theory, they're sort of welcome kits, right? I mean, it's like they're going to get a kind bar, they get a journal. The journal can't have any staples in it because they're not allowed anything. They get that we're putting crayons in. So there's a number of things that are going inside. And it's like, what are we going to call this kit? It's not a welcome kit. These people don't think of themselves as you know, this isn't like, you know, welcoming, right? And so we call them inmates.
Okay.
So they are inmates. They are not guests. They are treated horribly. Horribly. There's no humanity inside. And these are people who have not been convicted of a crime. Horribly. So so they're called inmates, Terry.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And the guards are not called guards. So I have to be very careful. I know I referenced and said guards a couple times, but they have to be called officers. The officers. And some of them are just so mean. I mean, there's a couple that when I see them, the hair on the back of my neck stands up. The way they scream at people, the way that they use, some of these officers use our hour, and remember they only get 2 hours outside of their cell a day, right? Unless there's a lockdown or any issue, then they don't get to go outside their cell. One time I was there and the ladies had been in 6 solid days. Not once could they get out. Could you imagine 6 days inside your little cell? No shower, no stretching your legs, no, it was horrible. But yeah, some officers sometimes will only let like 5 or 6 people out for our group, and breaks my heart. But we typically have between 12 and 15. We don't like to have the group any more than 15. It's just hard for us to manage. Oh, and also, by the way, I should tell you this, we are not allowed to ever close our eyes. This is part of the, you know, ever close our eyes or touch any of the inmates. Believe it or not, the touch is really hard, because when you've gotten to know someone and they've asked you and you're praying with them, and to not be able to put your hand on their shoulder, right?
Oh, wow.
Or to not be able to, there's one woman there who I absolutely love. Her name is Anita. She is so intelligent, and I don't know why she's in. She doesn't wear red, she wears green. So she has 2 small boys, and she has not seen her boys 19 months. And every time I'm inside, every time I see her, every week, in fact, when I was in London, I wrote a letter for her for each week I was gone. So she knew that I was thinking about her and praying for her. She's so overwhelmed by grief for not being able to see and to be missing out on her boys' birthdays and, you know, events in their lives. I would give anything to be able to hug her. This woman needs a hug so much.
Wow.
And I cannot hug her.
Mm.
And, you know, I do this, you know, the like little virtual hug kind of thing, but I can't do it. Luckily, her cellmate is really phenomenal. And they have connected very, very, very well. And it really pleases me that God has put these two together, because they, Anita's cellmate, Cheryl, is not married and does not have children, but they they're both of the same ethnicity. And I think they understand each other. And it is just a gift that they have each other. But yeah.
Mm.
Jan,
Yeah.
Jan, this is Tom. Thank you so much for what you're doing. I just can't imagine what you're, and you said 10 years?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, a lot of people, you know, are like, Jan, I tried to reach you today. It was like, it's a Wednesday. And I'm like, you know, I don't have my cell phone on Wednesdays
Yeah.
for like
Well,
3 hours of the day. And I was like, don't worry about me. I can't take my cell inside. Yeah.
God bless you for what you're doing.
Yeah,
Really,
absolutely.
Tom, and Beverly, I get more out of going. I know I get more out of it than the ladies get. It is so rewarding, and I have learned so much from these ladies. One woman last week told me this, and I'm still processing this thought. She said, I want to see how I can say it. She said, some Christians think my sins are bad, but they don't look at their own sins. It really made me think, because the whole idea of Christianity is so muddled in these women's minds. They feel so judged by Christians. They feel so, and many of them are Catholic, by the way, or have had a Catholic upbringing. So they also, this notion that God loves them just the way they are. And one of the things I constantly say is my God doesn't have a scoreboard. It's not Letitia, 18 sins, Jan 1. I said, I am so relieved that our God is not the God of keeping score, because no one would be adequate for that unconditional love, right? No one would be. And so this whole notion of reframing what a relationship with God could look is really exciting for me. And I have grown and I have learned so much through this process, especially in the mental health unit. And Sue DeLong might appreciate this. It's like, you don't go in there with complicated theology, right? You got to go in there with just stripped down, very simple concepts. And it's so gratifying for me to get to that point in my faith too, right? Just the simple story of loving your neighbor like you love yourself, and loving God with all your, is like, it's just refreshing. It's refreshing to not feel burdened by everything and just strip it down to love and acceptance and unconditional connection and this desire. I tell the ladies all the time, that God is weeping for them. God is weeping. God loves them so much. God does not, even though God isn't human, and we talk about that a lot, but that God weeps that they're in this situation because God wants all of his children to prosper. And he has not, she has not given up on them. And I take that lesson to heart all the time because, it's very good for me to remember that at my age and at where I am in my life, I can be, I could have such a stronger faith connection too. And that God is like cheering me on. Think of, God as my cheerleader Tom, thank you for thanking me, but
Oh, it's all good.
what I get out of this is probably next to my family, the most important commitment that I feel I have in my life is just showing up. And I feel very responsible for showing up. If I'm on, vacation or something and can't be there, I always have someone there. And they always know, and I write little notes to the women, so that they know that I'm thinking and praying for them. And yeah.
And Susie normally is with you? The two of you go together?
Yep, we go together. We try to go together. Just because we love to share the experience with each other, and it's very helpful. So like, she's gone next week, so I'll be there, and if Wednesday falls on Thanksgiving or Wednesday falls on, a holiday, we always want to be there, right? So between the two of us, we love going in together and we love praying and talking about the women together, but we love the fact that we cover for each other. Because I was in London for 3 weeks with my brand new newborn granddaughter. So Susie was there each Wednesday. So
Well, you're a tag team. That's great.
yeah.
I admire bravery.
It does. It's not. I know. I mean, the bravery was for me was just getting over that initial fear, right? I just had to get over that. I knew once I got in, I'm never ever afraid, ever. It's all just our perception of what we think, right?
It's just women being together.
Yeah, it's powerful. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate your words today, Jan, and you definitely, it feels like a gift that you're providing to the women there. So it just is wonderful to hear what the work is. I've always wondered about it. I'm one of those card donators that donates cards, as my neighbors do. So, it's good for me to hear what is happening with that and how I can continue to support that effort. So thank you for being today and sharing your story. And again, a big gift that you're providing, you and Susie both provide at the jail. So kudos, and you'll always be in my thoughts and prayers.
Thank you. And those are important. Those prayers are really important. And the prayers for the women are important too, right?
Okay.
By the way, can I just say that over the 10-year period, there was one woman inside who was a daughter of a very active member of our church. And there was another woman about 3 years ago who attended LAUMC as a child, a different one, as a teenager. So I found that one of the things we're not supposed to do is ever share personal information. So a lot of times people say, well, what church, like, where do you live, or blah, blah, blah. And we're told very specifically in our training not to share any personal information. We have on occasion shared that we go to LAUMC. and not in a big group, but one-on-one with people that we're comfortable with. We don't think LAUMC would ever be an inviting place for people who are leaving incarceration. It's very hard to get to our church because most people don't have transportation. We're not sure how people would be received within the congregation, but there are churches in San Jose and other places that are really welcoming to and have the kind of wraparound welcoming and kind of housing and food and things like that a lot of people need once they leave incarceration. That would be a very interesting other conversation to have with your group sometime, Terry, is, you know, like what happens when they leave, right? Like what, you know, because I think this is a perpetual problem. You know, I mentioned, you know, Maricela, seeing her again, but we just see these people come back in and come back in and come back in. It just breaks your heart, right? But yeah, there's a really interesting organization that one of the members of our church, Priscilla, I can't remember her last name, Peaceful Families, is really is a part of their organization. And they work with rebuilding family connections outside of incarceration. Very interesting group. House of Grace, who I know a lot of you have heard because we bring them in once a year for compassion, for outreach connection Sundays. Do a lot of work with women, reuniting women with their kids. So there's some really good opportunities, and I'd love to chat about that with any of you one-on-one if you're interested. But potential future topic, if that would be of interest, is kind of like, okay, what happens? What's that like? What's that look like when someone leaves? So,
Jen, you said you talked about the cards and the card sorting, but you said, and there are other ways to support this program. What are some of the ways that you're thinking about?
Well, some of the things that we do is like, we offer people to go inside once in a while. Pastor Dirk, you know, on the men's side, there's an actual men's chapel that was built by the Methodists. So you know, once in a while once in a while we offer services there. And if you check the e-news, you'll see opportunities that we try to present. There's books. I'll tell you, we can only bring paperback books in, and the themes have to be a certain theme. But I bring 8 books a week in: fiction, nonfiction, spiritual, not spiritual. Books are the lifeline for our incarcerated neighbors because they don't have anything else to do. So there's we'll do a book drive a couple times a year and just try to get people to, you know, to provide their books. There's Compassion Week projects. We've got card sorting we need help with desperately on the 8th. I'm sorry, on the 6th. And then we've got packing projects for peaceful families. There's note writing. You know what? The women, when I bring handwritten notes from people in the congregation of just, hey, thinking about you, you know, here's a poem you might want to think about. When I bring these notes in to the women, they're like, oh my gosh, people are thinking about me besides you, Jan. Yeah, or you. So, you know, little things like that are really helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well,
Sandy,
Jan,
you said you had something, right? Sandy Hansen, didn't you have your hand raised?
Yes, I may have or dozed off or whatever, but went past me. Are you aware of other sorts of services that supportive services that are available to them?
Inside or outside?
Inside, I guess. I remember years ago, as a student at San Jose State, I participated in Friends Outside, and we worked with the families of the incarcerated, did some tutoring, but I'm just wondering what other services are.
Yeah, so Friends Outside, I think doesn't exist anymore, but there's a different organization, but that's all outside, right? So
Yeah,
that's once they're out. And there are some opportunities depending on how you are categorized inside. Okay. So for instance, I believe if you're a minimum, you can have access, you have more than, you can have access to GED classes. So where someone can, where there's a class once or twice a week that's given by the programs department of the sheriff's office, where they can get some, they can work on their GED. There used to be before COVID, different AA opportunities, again, offered by the programs group by the sheriff's department. That stopped during COVID and has not started again. We cannot think of a group that can use AA more than a lot of the women, and I'm assuming the men. I don't ever work on the men's side. So there's very limited, very, very limited programming available inside. Very unfortunate. It's very, very unfortunate. Because what do you do all day?
yeah. I can remember as a librarian, I worked with Alameda County, and we had jail services, and we had people from the library that went in and books. And I had a couple of friends that went to my church, Pleasanton, who actually were on staff at the Santa Rita, which, you know, similar to Elmwood, and they were teachers. So there were educational staff.
Each unit, each of the units has a little library. There's no one, so there's no one responsible for, so programs doesn't do the library. So in the Santa Clara County, the only people who can volunteer are through the chaplaincy office, right? And so that's why I can bring books in. The last couple years during Compassion Week, we've had projects where we have had donated books. We've sorted the books, and we've had teams that got 2-hour clearance, and we were able to go into the units and restock the little libraries. But that is not something that's managed by the programs department. Programs meaning, you know, officially part of the Santa Clara County Sheriff's Department. And so that's why I bring 8 books in every Wednesday, because these books, if you can think about it, you can go in and stock a library, and usually within a month, the books have been completely torn apart. Completely. They can only have paperbacks. Some of the women, full disclosure, will use it for toilet paper or take a book and use it for writing paper. But most of them get read. And by the time, 15 people have read a used paperback book, it's completely fallen apart.
Right.
What I do on Wednesdays is I go into the little library. It's just a shelf. And I always, before I start my program, pull out all the books that have been so ripped apart that it's missing half the book, and then I throw it in the trash. So, yeah.
So
Jan?
money for a commissary probably would be helpful too, right, Jen?
I'm sorry, what?
Money for the commissary for people in general would be helpful too.
Yeah, it would be really helpful. I just don't know fairly how you would, execute that with all those inmates. Because you wouldn't want it to be a reward system, right? Like, oh, you go to my, you go to my Bible study or my faith formation class, so we're going to put money on your commissary. I mean, it's just, that would be tricky. I don't know how that would work, but because even like I bring color sheets in every week. I take color books. I print off. I go to church. I'll print 50 different color sheets, and then every week I bring them to my study, and then I give like 20 or 30 of them to the guards to give to the women who haven't come out, right? And because I don't want the people who are just in my group or just in the group to be rewarded, because a lot of them can't get out if they want to get out. A lot of them really suffer from mental illness and couldn't sit in a group, or some don't want to, they don't want to. They don't have much choice about what they can and can't do. So giving the opportunity to say, no, I'm not going to go to a group is a little opportunity for them to flex their freedom, right? So just like they're not forced to take their meds. I wish they were, because, I see these women when they first come in, and then when they stabilize and when they start actually consistently taking their medications, they're completely different people. It's so wonderful. It's so wonderful to see it. And I can see sometimes when they go off their meds, and I'll say, oh, I noticed, boy, your hair looks different, or, something, because they haven't washed their hair, and they'll say, yeah, I don't want to do my meds anymore. And, I'm always thoughtfully trying to say, well, do you think, has that are you happier without it? Or are you feeling better, or blah, blah, blah. And usually it's a control thing. They just want something that they can say no to. But it's an issue. Yeah, Terry, sorry.
And just 2 quick questions. I know we're out of time.
Yeah.
What do they do about meals, and what about visitors?
So they get 3 meals a day. They're on a really crazy schedule. So I think breakfast is like at 4 a.m. and it's lunch is usually around 10, and then I think their dinner is usually around 4. The meals look terrible and smell terrible, but
do they go to a cafeteria?
Oh, no. They don't get to leave their cell. It's only 2 hours a day. So it's not during mealtime. It's not one of the times they can leave. So they're delivered on a tray.
Oh, wow.
And some women suffer from our hoarders. And so you walk by their unit, and it just stinks because they've got 40 little milk cartons empty sitting in their cell, right? And you just feel for them that they suffer from that, right? What was your second question? You said
about visitors.
Oh, visitors. I'm not 100%. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure I understand how that system works.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Because I know that most of them don't have visitors, but I don't know if it's because, there isn't anybody in their families who would visit them. I don't know how it works, but someone Wednesday said, oh, I got to see my cousin. And I was like, oh, you had a visit. And she was so excited, and she told me all about it, but it's very rare that anyone says they ever see a visitor. Yeah. But I don't know why that's the case. I don't know if they are limited to that, or if it's,
Well, Jan, we want to thank you for the wonderful, wonderful work you do. You're just amazing. And we bless you. And thank you for your time and your energy and all the good things you do. You're just amazing. So we bless you. We thank you. And thank you to the audience for everybody tuning in, and it is being recorded. So I know a lot of people were not able to participate today. So it'll be on the recording. So please share that with your friends. So have a good weekend, and thank you, Jan, and thank you, everybody. And
thank you, Terry, for doing this.
My pleasure. Thanks, Terry.
Just
bye,
thank
everybody.